I am Fernando Pizzani, and I will present the case that the architecture of the American Revolution is forward-looking in terms of its form, language, and content. I will substantiate this by analyzing three aspects. Firstly, the historical context and antecedents that promoted and legitimized the revolution's ideals and the revolution itself. Secondly, how the architecture expresses the social aspirations of the American people. And finally, I will analyze the architectural work of Thomas Jefferson because of his essential role in both the revolution and the architecture, and how his work is not a mere reproduction of classical architecture, but a reinterpretation of the classical principles and a symbolic expression of new ideas. Historically, the American Revolution was not a singular phenomenon generated by unfair taxes, control, and oppression by the colonial power. This can be considered the catalyst. Instead, like all social movements in history, it was part of an evolution of views and aspirations. McConnell argues that the Italian Renaissance principles of liberty and the advancement of the individual were the chief reasons behind the American Revolution. The American Revolution, like the Renaissance, was forward-thinking, developing new interpretations and ideas and moving forward, inspired by what it was considered the period of highest human achievements in history, as proposed by Pyle and Gara in the book A History of Interior Design. Similarly, there is a direct correlation between the Renaissance, the Age of Enlightenment, and the American and French revolutions. Therefore, one can say that the American Revolution's architecture expresses the progressive ideas born out of those periods. In contrast with the Gothic revival of the late 18th and early 19th centuries, when architecture sought its inspirations from medieval architecture, motivated mainly by its nostalgia and some writers' subjective and debatable views that the medieval world was morally superior. The American Revolution architecture is forward-looking in its intentions and expressions. The ideas and aspirations of the American people are clearly expressed in the Declaration of Independence. Fundamental to these views and aspirations is the assertion that natural law grants people the right to assume political independence, the right to institute the government, and that all men are created equal. These ideas were extraordinarily bold and innovative at the time. It concludes with the creation of 13 free and independent states. These new nations needed to break free from the colonial past and redefine their identity. Architecture is the only discipline that touches all areas of human existence. Defined by the Council of Architecture of the Government of India as, quote, architecture is the matrix of human civilization, an authentic measure of the social status and an evocative expression of the ethos of an era, unquote. Moreover, as Sigmund asserts, Jefferson believed that architecture, given its scale and public nature, could educate, inspire, and delight. Hence, architecture was the most powerful way to generate a new identity. This new identity consolidates with the development of the federal style. The federal style is characterized by moving toward classicism inspired by the work of Renaissance authorities like Palladio and Serlio, also with firm philosophical connections to the Roman Republic, the model for the new nation. Therefore, by breaking with the past and developing a fresh interpretation of the classical period, the architecture is not backward-looking, but inspired by an epoch of significant human development and projecting towards the future. Thomas Jefferson is the epitome of the Renaissance polymath, a statesman involved in creating the independence of the United States, a politician, a self-taught architect, and a strong influence on the development of American architecture. Jefferson understood the limitations of the classical temple, so he appropriated the design for unrelated modern purposes, and his work can be described as the origin of the evolution of the stylistic revivals that took place at the dawn of the 19th century. One of his first works in 1785 was the design of the Capitol for the state of Virginia. The concept is closely inspired by the Maison Carrée, a Roman temple from the 1st century BC in Nîmes, France. However, Jefferson adapted and modified the concept by introducing windows at 2 floor levels to provide light for the new program. He also replaced the Corinthian order of the Roman temple with the Ionic order in a pragmatic approach to design within the skills of the American stonemasons of the time. Monticello, his own house, is perhaps his most original interpretation of the classical style. Often associated with the design of Palladio's Villa Rotonda, it is very different and original. In his book, The Architecture of Democracy, American Architecture and the Legacy of the Revolution, architect Alan Greenberg highly praises Jefferson's architecture. He suggests that one of his most innovative and original approaches in the design of Monticello was the integration of the first and second floor windows, so the house appears as one-story building. The Encyclopedia Britannica defines it as, quote, one of the finest examples of the early classical revival style in the United States, unquote, and Jefferson's masterpiece. In a 2015 New York Times article by Elisabetta Povoledo, the renowned architectural historian and curator Guido Beltramini is quoting asserting that, quote, Palladio was solely the conduit for Jefferson's vision of a new world built on the twin pillars of reason and beauty, unquote. By introducing classical architecture as the identity of the new nation, Jefferson reinforced the social ideas of the classical era: self-government, reason, education, and civic responsibility, bringing them into his time and projecting them into the future. I have demonstrated that the architecture of the American Revolution is forward-thinking as the evolution of the Renaissance and the Age of Enlightenment ideals. It provides an identity to a new nation and contributes to creating a new social order fulfilling the aspirations of the American people. It reinforces the classical social principles in a modern context, enhancing the democratic and social ideas of the present. Thank you.